forgot me in the last couple lectures. Today I'm going to talk about design wireframing. Kind of high level why we're talking about this is for milestone 1, you will be presenting sort of ideas about what your application will look like, as well as what your basic audience is and other things like that. So today we're going to talk about how we do design and what are some of the considerations of doing that. So whether you like it or not, your application is visual. I'm a quite visual person, and you're probably going to have to show off what your site looks like. And so why do we care about design is because someone's going to be looking at it, and that's ultimately going to alter how they interact with their application as well. It also drives users to stay or go away. When you see something that looks like a nice website, you're more likely to give it some more time, and maybe if it's harder to find a feature, you're kind of okay with that, because you give it a little bit more effort. If it looks like a complete cluster, you probably are going to give it less time and less sort of willingness to go through. So on that note, I'm going to first talk about some design principles. Who's heard of UI and UX as a term? Do you guys know the difference between the two? Cool. Do you want to tell us? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to reiterate your answer. User interface is about the design or the layout, how it looks visually to you. User experience is more about how the user actually interacts with your application. So first, to dive into user interface, I've got a couple of examples. For example, here's a user interface you might have been aware of in the past. This is the old MIT website from 2003. You might notice that it's not exactly the most aesthetic or appealing website. Maybe this is your look, but it's a little bit more of like a link generator with a bunch of links to different places you might want to go to with less organization about perhaps what MIT is. And this is the new website, which some people have found controversial. I personally very much like the design, which has a very clear differentiation between where all the links are, perhaps news articles on one side, and then if you want to find out more, there's a search bar that's rather large and really drags your attention to it. And from there, we can also talk about user experience. I kind of just briefly also talked about just the way it looks draws you to certain things and certain aspects of the website. And that will drive how and what features users go to. And so, reiterating what user experience is, it's more about your overall experience and how a user interacts with your product, and more than just visuals. So here's a pretty good example of UI versus UX. Classic Heinz bottle. One of these is a lot easier to use than the other. If you're aware of the glass bottle, it looks very nice perhaps, but it's a complete pain to get ketchup out of. You are constantly trying to shake it out. On the other hand, the plastic bottle, which is less aesthetic, has really a focus on user experience, and you can squeeze it, and so it's much easier to get ketchup out. And this is sort of like a difference about functionality and versus aestheticism. And you can do both. This is not a choose one over the other motion either. So before we go into more like user experience and wireframing, we're going to talk about UI and how visual design works, and some considerations you might want to think about. So I'm going to go over 3 basic good design principles, and we're going to start with identity. When you look at some websites, you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. From a distance, you can kind of tell that's Facebook because of the color and the layout. And so good design is going to really show you what the website is. Here's an example of a Bootstrap website, which is the Bootstrap example website. Bootstrap also has a very definitive look to it. It kind of looks like that. If you use Bootstrap, it also tends to sort of generate a lot of lookalikes, though. Here's another Bootstrap website, which also has a very similar layout format. They did change the actual font itself, though. So one thing we are going to talk about is Bootstrap is really good to create consistency and create layouts such as grids, which are harder to do on your own if you don't have any experience with CSS and styling. But Bootstrap can also lead to copycats or very similar looks. So if you use Bootstrap, I'm not saying don't use Bootstrap. Bootstrap is great. But also, if you're using Bootstrap, don't just use all the same fonts and colors as they do. Perhaps think about ways you can make your stuff stand out and look slightly different. For example, here's an example of a site that has a very similar layout to a Bootstrap website, but looks aesthetically different than the other two that we just showed. On another note, here's, for example, two websites I'm going to show that have a very similar look to each other. Here's the first one, and here's the second. They have a very similar layout. However, they stand out completely differently because of the difference in their fonts. This one's much more, perhaps, like streamlined looking, with like thinner fonts and a more washed out background, versus this one with like thick fonts that are very round and large and really stand out to you, even though they both use all caps as well. So those are some considerations for you to think about and how you can show your identity. And for example, another thing that you guys can think about if you're using maps is that your maps don't all have to be the Google, if you use the Google Maps API. They don't have to look all the same. This is a themed Google Maps that you can just pull off the internet, and you can attach it to your Google Map, and it will look completely different. So, some thoughts on that. In general, to create visual identity, you can think about what type of fonts you're using, color palettes, and shapes. And although I don't have the word up there, you should also think about consistency. Your every single page doesn't need to have a different font, a different color palette, or a different shape on there. To clarify shapes a little bit, rounded corners look completely different from not rounded corners. And do all your things have rounded corners versus not? Maybe you like using triangles for your buttons versus circles. All thoughts for you. Good design also conveys importance. And what does this kind of mean? For example, I don't know what to look at first here. Everything is just there in bright colors, all trying to grab my attention, and I don't know where to start. I didn't realize there was a sidebar for the longest time, but that's a sidebar, the thing on the red. That's what we're supposed to navigate from, and this does not convey what's most important to the user at all. On the other hand, here's the Discord website. There's a very clear idea of some fonts are smaller than others. There's certain things that grab your attention. The open Discord and download for Mac, the buttons that people you actually want them to click are a different color, bigger and brighter than everything else. The visuals take up a large space as well, and really make sure that you pull towards certain things. So on a high level, what I mean by designing for importance is designing your layout. Here's another example on a more like sketched out version of what the difference is. And this, we use the word UX as well, because your layout, your user interface is also going to drive user experience in this case. For example, on the bad UX side, you see there's a ton of text, all the fonts and things, there's a bunch of drop downs, you can go left or right for the pictures. There's just a lot of things for people that they can do. What you want people to have options is to find all the features they need, but also be able to easily identify them. On the good UX side, we cut down a lot of those things. Perhaps some things were unnecessary, and you don't need that many pictures that you can scroll through, and really streamlines the process a lot more. Also, you might notice that certain things are enlarged. For example, the large button on the banner is also increased in size. There's less text. There's something to be said about brevity here as well. On this note, layout helps you with usability and learnability, which are two terms I'm kind of just throwing at you. I'm going to briefly explain. Some of the things I mentioned about how usable it was, for example, the first website you couldn't tell what to look at, makes it very unusable and you're not really sure what to do. Learnability has to do with how easy it is for you to get to know and know where the features are. Learnability also has to do with, for example, the nav bar. If I'm on the website and I want to find where my home page is, if it's on, or where my profile page is, if it's listed in the nav bar, it becomes really easy to learn and find out where to keep going back to those features again. But if your nav bar changes on each page and the profile is only on the home page but not on somewhere else, it becomes very hard to learn and use and access the same features over and over again. So that's kind of a brief overview of the difference between these two. And if you have more questions about like some of the design principles I'm going to say, because we're not going to talk terribly much about a lot of the design principles in detail, you can find me in office hours and I'll happily talk about them for days. Here's another example of usability and learnability. On this meter, I think this is a meter actually, it's quite easily to be used because they have grouped everything together. For example, it's labeled the big 1, 2, 3. Naturally, we're taught to follow in that order. Hopefully you don't do steps 3, 2, 1. And you will follow first doing pay, print, and display. Perhaps the layout is a little bit jumbled because you have to jump around in this kind of weird flow in order to access 1, 2, and 3. However, everything is clearly labeled and it's easy to learn what you should do first, what you should do next, and what's the final thing to do. Finally, we're going to talk about conveying emotions. This one's probably like the one that you're like, what? What does this mean? We're going to go through an example to explain exactly how you can convey emotion through design. This is the original Airbnb website. It looks kind of like a newspaper clipping, like compilation of things. Not entirely sure. It looks very 2000s, but to explain exactly how this works, I'm going to show what they changed it to. This is their new Airbnb website. And if you see, they also changed their logo. And this one's probably perhaps one of the most important ways to talk about how they changed and conveyed emotion, is all of these combined images, they want to show that there's people, places, love, and this is trying to convey emotion and feeling through Airbnb, through just the logo itself. We also see a huge change in the font and the way it looks. It looks a lot more professional. Maybe that makes you trust it more than just like newspaper clippings, which is what the first one perhaps reminded you of. Another thing is, if you look at the listings, you can actually heart them, which feels great, like to say that I love this versus I'm bookmarking this. It gives a completely different emotion to you, and you're more likely to do it. And on that note of things that make you want to like click a button or something, the Twitter heart icon is very, very nice to press. It does this like beautiful little fireworks animation that made people and increased the amount of likes people gave out after they introduced this animation. So good design can actually get you to do things. Visual aesthetics, maybe you really like clicking on buttons when they do a certain animation. It's something to think about. Design, visual design, makes your user experience enjoyable. And that's the big punchline of visual design, actually. From there, we're going to talk about wireframing. So I'm kind of going quickly, so I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions about what I just talked about for visual design? Okay, cool. I didn't see any hands. Feel free to stop me, because we're going to actually do stuff during this portion. Wireframing is going to be talking a lot about what user experience is like. So first of all, what is wireframing? Does someone know? I want to raise their hand and tell me. Okay. Wireframing looks something like this. It's laying out your website without putting in a lot of detail, perhaps, and also showing the flow. So if you look at the first picture with all of the phone, there's a bunch of arrows linking certain buttons to other flows and what other layouts look like. We also see Facebook's very identifiable layout. And it's also really bare bones, right? They laid it out. Both of them look kind of sketchy. There's not a lot of color usage. The point of wireframing is not to focus on visual design. Wireframing is about what is the user's flow through your website. How do they get from one place to another? How do they use your features? I'm going to talk a little bit more about flow real quick. So mocking up flow and layout information is the point of wireframing. And one of the important things is it should be drafty. At this point, you shouldn't make a wireframe that looks exactly like what you expect your website to look like, because you get attached to that. And you want to change things. The point of a wireframe is so someone else can look at it and be like, oh, I kind of understand how this works. Maybe you should move this around here. Maybe this should be larger. And if you get super attached to your wireframe, you're unlikely to make changes. And this is mocking up. It's a mock-up. It should be a draft. Here's some images of another version of like a very drafty-looking wireframe. Wireframing is done from anywhere on like pen and paper to different Adobe has a experience design, which is also a format you can use. And there's also, you can just wireframe Google Slides. We're going to actually go through and do a wireframe at the end of this. So to talk a little bit more about flow, I'm going to use the MIT website again. So let's say I'm an alumni and I want to know where to donate. Like, I really feel like this place gave me something. I'm going to give them a lot of money back. Where do I start? Can someone give me a suggestion of where I would go first? Yes?
The alumni tab.
Yeah. So, and is there one more suggestion? There's actually one. Yes?
The search bar.
Yes, perfect. So those are the two places I'd probably go to first, and they're easily accessible from the first page. There's not too many things to look through. The search bar is very prominent, and the nav bar has very clear options. So let's say I want to do the search bar first. I'd probably look up the word donate. From here, what do I click? If you can see that. Does anyone, which one would is most relevant?
Giving to MIT.
Yes, giving to MIT. So then from here, I would probably click on that, and that brings me to this website, which then, very obviously, what would I click next? Yes, make a gift. Or give now. There's 2 buttons. They're both red. So let's go back and go through the other way of doing this. If I go through alumni, if you click alumni, it brings me to this website. What do I do from this web page? Does anyone know? Yes?
There's a generously support.
Yes! In the second paragraph, that's much smaller, it says generously support, and it's a link, highlighted, right there. So if you click that, that brings us here. So the website does something very similar. I drew out the flow for you guys here of different ways you can get from one web page to another to get to the feature that you actually are trying to find. There's 2 things to be noticed about this. One is that one way was harder to get to. If you went through alumni, you'd actually have to do some reading to find generously support. While if you did the search bar, it was a lot quicker. Both are optional options that you can use, and redundancy actually pretty much helps here. Because if we give more options, if for example I went to alumni and there was no way for me to get to giving from there, that would be pretty bad, because that is something that people would go to. So part of doing flow and layout is to think about and anticipate what users will go to when they're trying to do something. So back to how do I make a wireframe. These are your options. Pen and paper is somewhat free. Google Slides is somewhat free. And Adobe XD is also somewhat free. So pen and paper, you guys can all do this. It's a little bit more difficult perhaps if you're really into drawing straight lines. Get a ruler as well. Google Slides is probably going to be your easiest option, and will probably be the easiest for us to also, when you present milestone 1. Adobe Experience Design, or XD, is a free program currently by Adobe, which I absolutely love actually. But I'm going to make a wireframe with you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a very basic wireframed website. And I'm going to first do it in Adobe XD, and then I'm going to do it in Google Slides. Okay, so this is just kind of an example of what we're going to make. We're going to make the exact same thing in both, just to kind of show what sort of flow can look like. So I have an Adobe Experience Design. You can kind of see this is like one page. And so it's already given to me in the size of perhaps a web page might be, 1920 by 1080. And I'm like, okay, so for my web app, which is going to be, I'm going to make the bathroom code sharing thing that I talked about during ideation. I probably want a nav bar so people can access things easily. I'm going to make my nav bar just like a darker color so people can very clearly see it. Bathroom codes. We're going to fix that in a sec. Oh man, okay. Cool. And that's just going to be the name of my website, and I'm going to make it white and put it on my nav bar. Cool, yeah. So let's say I'm going onto this website and I want to we're going to have user logins. So let's say I probably want someone to be on a landing page. They go here and they have no idea what this is. So I probably want, I'm typing, it's in white. I probably want the name of my site again on the landing page. Ooh, huge. And also include other text. So this is an about for this website. Cool. And of course, I probably don't want my description to be as large as this. I'm going to pare down the size if it will let me. Cool. And I'll just drop this right below. And perhaps that's not terribly great in difference of size, so I'm just going to bump it up a little bit more. And for now, again, this is supposed to be super sketchy. You don't need to actually write out all your descriptions for everything right now. So I would highly recommend not writing out all your text. And perhaps I probably want a sign up and a login button. So I'm just going to grab 2 pieces of the square, and those will be my buttons. Cool. That's probably all I actually need on the landing page. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So my next page, I'm just make another one of these. Wow. Tools. So once you've logged in, perhaps I want to show you what the profile looks like. Maybe you can have a picture here with your face. We'll just make it a bubble. Let's do everything in gray. And then probably want the user's name. And I'll just stick it there. And maybe I want people to access any code they've shown before. So maybe I'll just have little cards that would be, oh, you submitted a place for this. So place. And the code that you submitted for that place so you can remember it. One nice thing about Adobe XD is you can make grids and it just makes them for you. So, and then you can ungroup it and it's beautiful. Anyway, another thing you can do, for example, is I can make this an icon. So I'll make it a symbol and then add another symbol over here. So if I alter one of them, both of them will change. I promise I'm not sponsored. And of course, I also want people to be able to log in or sign up from the actual nav bar itself. So I'm just going to add text for login. For there. And just to show you that that changed both of them. Wow, it says login on the other one as well. There's something odd that you might notice in the nav bar right now is that login is larger than bathroom codes, which is kind of weird. Usually the name of your app will be larger. For now, I'm not going to worry about that, but for example. Right now, I have no way of, if you've logged in, that works, but if I don't have a sign up, I probably want someone to actually be able to sign up for my website. So, something super simple I'll do to mock that up. Let's just make a couple boxes that would pretend to be user inputs, where I put probably, that could be like username and password. That's also white, I'm sorry. Cool. And so to mock up flow is one way I could draw arrows that would mock everything up from one another. Another way I can do this is something that's for Adobe XD, is I can move to prototype and then link things together. So if I press login, it would go here. If I logged in, it would go there. Cool. And just a quick demonstration, then I can go to this fake version of the website. Let's go back to home though. Let's start here. Play. And I can go log in. Log in. So that's just an example of what sort of a professional wireframing tool is like. You can totally do this. This is free. It's not hard to learn. But I'm also going to do this in Google Slides. So an easy way to do this in Google Slides is for each slide to be one version, one page itself. So to make the exact same thing, I'm just going to grab a shape. Fill that, and that'll be my nav bar. Go. And then we'll add some text. Back. A wonderful website. We'll make that white again. And just drag that back up to the nav bar. Okay. Cool. And then to do the same thing, I'm just going to grab, to make the landing page again, make another one of those. Make it huge. That's too big. center the text, and I can just drag it in the middle. And then we'll also do this as a website. And just also justify. That's fine. Maybe it should be centered. Okay. And then again, we'll just make 2 boxes to be login and sign up. Cool. So anything you can do in XD, you can do on slides. Don't be afraid. You can also link things, I think, on slides, if I'm correct. I can actually link it to another slide itself. And so if I had slides in this presentation that were different pages, you can do the same thing. So what this is all about, again, wireframing, to remind you, is about figuring out what your layout will look like, to figure out how different things, what information will be displayed. For example, places and codes on the user dashboard, maybe I want something more than that. Maybe I also want to add that they could have upvotes. So, oh no. Maybe this looks like a website you know. I'm going to stick that on the side. Maybe that's actually what I want things to look like. It's about figuring out what looks right to you, how far away, what information is actually required on the page. Maybe I don't want to display this many things. Maybe I decided that, like, oh, I don't actually need to display that much. So it can be a lot smaller. Figuring out how much you want to display at once. You should use this app, I love it. Adobe, please sponsor me. And for example, one thing that we're very deliberately missing right now in bathroom codes as a website is I actually wanted people to search bathroom codes, if you remember from my ideation. Right now I can't do that at all. So another thing is maybe I want there to be a map, Google Maps. Looking at Google Maps and DuckDuckGo, so that's fine. So maybe I actually want there to also be a search site, a search area, and I'm just going to make that. And that's something as simple as that to mock up what's what on the page, really. Most of this is figuring out where are people going to go. For example, right now, there's no way to sign out. So that's something to think about. And something that's really good about linking and flowing is to figure out if I'm trying to get here, how do I want people to do it? Do I want people to be able to access this map before they've logged in? If not, then I don't want to show that to them until they have logged in. So perhaps only once you've logged in. I'm going to not make this simple. It's only when they've logged in do I want them to be able to go to map and sign out. So then, if I actually prototype this correctly, so if we started here, and I was like, oh, whoa, I would like to go to the map. I have no way of doing so currently. Once I've logged in, then I can head to this map website, although this should not say login anymore. But would highly recommend wireframing to show both staff for milestone 1, but also to figure out how you want people to be able to access your features, from where are they going to access your features, and which features are most necessary, and when are they most necessary. That's it for me on wireframing. If you have more questions, that's not where I want to be. Feel free to message / find us in Piazza or find us during office hours. A last note is resources. We have a huge resources page, and there is a lot of, I mentioned many design principles. A lot of that you can also find in the front end section of resources. We have different frameworks. We have Bootstrap. There are other alternatives to Bootstrap as well, such as semantic UI and flat UI, which are as easy to integrate as Bootstrap, just having a different look. For example, this is what semantic UI looks like. We have icons for you to use that you can access through one of these different ways to actually get fonts. Google Fonts is perhaps the best. If you are super needy in generating colors, as I am, there's apps to help you generate color schemes by just pressing spacebar. There's a bunch of little things to get inspired about if you are really interested in, like, oh, what are some ideas about great websites or not so great websites? We have some links to those there. Like, oh, I really like how this looks. You can then check out the website and sort of look at how their stuff looks like as well. Except this one has a loading page, so we're not going to look at it. As well as how to make different shapes with CSS. If you're really into CSS, we have an advanced CSS workshop next week, as well as other ways to make animations and stuff. Feel free to ask us, and there's tons of stuff you can get. So.